Hello, this is Brian from Tavaran Games here with another update to Dungeon Maker. Now, it's been a while since I posted a video update for Dungeon Maker, and I'll admit it's because I've slowed down working on the program. It's at a point where I'm quite happy with all the features it has, with how it works for actually running a campaign online and what it's let me do, and I want to bring it to a broader audience at this point. So in the near future, I'll be taking it out of early access. Now, that doesn't mean I'll stop working on the program. I'll still periodically be going in to add new items that you can place in the map maker, fixing any bugs that may crop up, as well as adding in any features, especially new ones that the broader audience comes up with, because I'm honestly running out of ideas. But anyways, having said all that, let's talk about the changes I've made since my last video update. So the first one here in the map maker, I've made it so that when you're placing light sources on the map, after you place them, you can click them to toggle whether they're on or off. And they will save that way, and when players load into the map, they will start that way. They will start whether you have them on or off. I figured this could be quite useful, especially if you have like a map set in an old tomb or an old cave that no one's been in 100 years. And the torches wouldn't realistically be on when the players get there. So now you don't have to explain it and get the Skyrim problem, and invent Draugr lighting them for the players. Instead, you just start with them turned off, the players will load in, and if they can find them, they can click on them and turn them on, but they will default off. So I figured that would be a good little feature to add to the maps. Now, while we're in the map maker, I've rearranged the floors into categories because I've added some new ones. So if we go to the ground, we had the original grass, but I've also added in this savanna grass and this brown grass for your maps. Savanna maps, as well as more like swamp areas or really dry areas. Under the water, I also added in a few new colors of water. So we now have green water, brown water, and red water. So you can do like blood rivers or muddy areas or toxic or poison areas, as well as adding in an ice texture for all of your wintry maps. Moving into the furniture, I've added in a dragon statue. It's also noticeably bigger than the other statues, as it rightfully should be. And this bone spire I've added, my idea being it could be like a rib from this giant monster that somebody stuck in the ground outside of their wooden fort to intimidate intruders. And speaking of bones, if we go over to the decorations, I've also added in some more types of bones. So these buried ribs, as well as a skeletal wing you can add, so you can finally have the dragon statue complete, since we had the skull before. But yeah, so those are the new items. Let's erase those. So let's save this map, though, with these torches turned off, and then let's go into multiplayer. So save exit. Let's go back and actually host the game. So that map is over here. Let's click into that. And you see when we load, those torches are indeed off. Now, another new feature you'll see, as I hover over the torches, a little flame icon comes up. So I added that for both players and the host, as well as one for doors. It'll come up when you're over a door. It'll show the close icon when you can close it, open icon when you can open it. The torches, again, will turn to turn off and on. And it's just a little indicator for the players and the game host to know that they can interact with this object. It's something suggested by a player a while ago, and I finally integrated it because I had a player playing one of my campaigns did not realize they could open doors or turn lights on and off. And they didn't even think to click to try it. So now there's this icon to let people know, oh, maybe I should click that. And just let players know quickly and visually, yes, this is something that can be interacted with. All right, so the other fix in the game is to the animated dice. So I added in animated dice a while ago. You click any dice, and when you're rolling it, they roll across the screen and land somewhere and show you a number. Now before, when you were zoomed in really close, they would appear really small and move super fast, and when you were zoomed out, they would appear huge and move really slow. The reason for that is they're an actual physical game object. They're not part of the user interface. So when they spawn into the game, I have to calculate how big they're supposed to be and how quickly they're supposed to move to make them look the right size based on how zoomed in and out you are. Now, I just did a crap job calculating that and coding that in when I first did it. So I finally went back and fixed that. So now we're zoomed out. The dice, though, still appear about the same size as when we're at a normal zoom. See, they look about the same size. And then when we're zoomed in, they sometimes get stuck in the corner. There we go. They appear about the same size no matter the zoom. And as you can see, because they're not game object and not part of the UI, they do zoom in and out with the map if they're still there. But yeah, so that just looks a lot cleaner and makes it a little bit nicer when you're rolling dice. Okay, so our next change is to our battle tracker. So let's start an encounter with the button up here. Let's add some enemies and some NPCs. And you can see right away the change I've made to the highlight. So before, there was a yellow square that would appear behind the units to highlight them and try to make them visible. But I found, especially when you're on nighttime mode, that square was really hard to see. So instead I decided that it would highlight the frame. And this really bright gold yellow, which makes them super visible, at least to me. So once we confirm, we can see, oh, yeah, right there. Boom. We know exactly whose enemy's turn it is. We can click them. We can move them around, do their turn, go to the next one. And very quickly, as the host of the game, you can see exactly whose turn it is. Whereas before, with the yellow highlight behind the unit, it just wasn't that visible. So I'd often find myself, especially in a large battle with a ton of units like this, having to look at the units really close up to see whose turn it was. And it was just wasting time. So now with the frame highlights, it's really visible, much easier to see. Click around, can very quickly track it. So it just speeds up the battle tracking process and makes your encounters go a little more smoothly, I hope. Now, with the battle tracker open, let's return to the campaign screen, and you can see right away it now closes. Whereas before, if you had the battle tracker open and you changed scenes or you went back to the campaign, the battle tracker would stay there. Except it might start causing some problems, especially if you hit the highlight next button, because it would be looking for an enemy that no longer exists, since all the enemies from the scene are destroyed on the scene change. So it could cause some issues. So I just set it up so when you change scenes, it closes the battle tracker before it changes the scene to make sure you don't run into that problem. All right, so the next little change, feature-wise, let's open up the briefing screen window. And if we start typing here with the AWSD keys, we can see the background doesn't move. Now, the AWSD keys are how you can control the camera out. So you can use the mouse, but you can also use AWSD or the arrow keys. But I had it so that when this was open and you were typing here, I didn't disable the camera movement. So you could be typing away and behind you, the entire map would just be shifting every time you hit these letters. It was just a little bit annoying, but I finally sat down and fixed it. So now you can use those letters to your heart's content while typing out your briefing screen text. And still, as soon as it's closed, you can go back to using those keys to move the camera. All right. So the last thing when we're hosting a game I've changed is for the exit game. Before, when you click the exit game button, you would just exit. It would go straight back to the main menu, no questions asked. But of course I did realize somebody could accidentally click on that. So I've now added in a confirm window that pops up in the middle of the screen, far away from the exit game button, so you can't accidentally double click your way out, for you to confirm. If you hit cancel, you just stay in the game. But if we hit exit, we are out. So that should help prevent accidental exits from the game or a host accidentally ending a game because they're trying to click a different button. So nice little thing to keep your games rolling and make sure you don't actually end something in the middle of a battle and then have to try to figure out where everyone was when you reload the game. Okay, and on that note, if we go to our NPCs or enemies, so let's just go to the NPCs. When we go return to main, so the exit, we also now finally have a save and exit confirmation screen. So we can save and exit, or cancel. So let's just exit. And that's true for all of the units, and it's true for enemies as well. We load into an enemy, we go to return to main, and we get that same screen. You hit cancel and we don't leave. So just a little thing to make sure, more to let players know that the unit is in fact being saved. Before, when you were hitting the return to main screen button, it would save everything and then return. But I realized that might not be clear to the person using the program. So now it just has that screen pop up, so you know, okay, I am indeed saving it. The data is saved. Or if you screwed up and you accidentally made changes and you don't know how to reverse it, you can just exit without saving and go back to the way it was. All right. So our last change is actually more to the back end, and we actually need to look at our source code to understand. So we need to look at this mirror data file. Let's zoom in a little, make it easier to see. So this file is how the game is sending the map data from the game host, the Dungeon Master, to the players, so that they don't have to actually download anything beforehand onto their system. They can just jump into a game, and the map data will sync to them all the data they need. So that's done through these synced variables, which are a part of the Mirror networking system, and they will send all of the data that's held in these variables to all the players. So we're sending over the object IDs, locations, their rotations, and any other information they need to load correctly into the game. Now, there is a limit to the amount of data that Mirror will actually send through a synced variable. And if you go over that limit, it can cause the player to disconnect or the game host to disconnect, and it will just end the game. So in order to be able to send a large map, in this case up to 5,000 objects, I need to send the object IDs as integers and as small as possible in order to actually send all the data we need for that large map, because the object IDs are actually saved as an object name and they're loaded into the game using an object name. So in order to do that, we need to create a reference list of all the objects in the game. So we go through the resources folder where all the objects are saved in the game system, and we add those objects to this growing list of objects, as well as the type of object, so that they get saved into saved and loaded into the correct layer in the correct way. And then when we're actually saving the map data, so we're going through the save file, we're going through all the object data. When we look through that list, and then we save the integer of where that object appears. So the object ID in the save file is the name. So we're going through the list of names and then saving into this synced variable where in that list that object name appears. Now before, I was having the Dungeon Master set those object references, and then those were also a synced variable. So that the player, if they were using a different version of Dungeon Maker where their resource folder had fewer items in it, that they were still seeing the correct number or the correct name to the number of the object they're trying to load. However, that worked fine when there was only 100, 150 placeable items, but now that there's close to 500 placeable items in the game, this reference list was getting to above the maximum that the sync variable was able to handle, and it was causing a problem of players would just be crashing out of the game. Like, they'd try to load in and immediately crash out. Or I'd try to host a game and it would immediately end because just too much data was trying to be sent. So now what I do is the players themselves set their own references based on their resource folder. Now this does mean if a player and host are using a different version of the game, the player might be trying to load the wrong objects. But since Dungeon Maker is being distributed through Steam, and Steam is incredibly good about pushing out updates, it's within seconds of me uploading an update. My Steam is already downloading it onto my system. I figure the host and the player are always going to be in the same version of the game, and this is just not something I have to worry about anymore. So now the players just set their own local references, and the mirror data only needs to send the actual map object information. And so since less data is being transferred to the players, I found it's a lot more stable. I've not had a single disconnect since I've made this change. The program is a lot more stable. And so it should be a lot better for everyone trying to use it, not getting accidental disconnects, making it so that they can't actually use this program. So anyway, that's all the changes have to talk about today. As always, if you have any ideas for new features you want to see, new items you'd like added to the game, any bugs you find, please let me know either the comments here or in the Steam discussion on the Dungeon Maker page of Steam. And until next time, have a good one.